The bottom line is the selling process begins from concept, design, business planning, partnering, funding, and carries through to the marketplace. Although entrepreneurs, founders, business owners, directors, and CEOs have to be great visionaries, not all have the ability to close business in real time. Many need professional closers to tell their story. Where are you on your business journey? Stay tuned as we explore this subject with various business leaders and sales professionals right here on The Bottom Line Show.
So, welcome to The Bottom Line Show. I'm your host, Russell Dinkins. The Bottom Line is where we actually talk to sales experts and industry experts on the sales process and how we can improve it. Today, we actually are pleased to welcome to the show Ryan Gallagher. He's our resident sales expert. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing great, Russell. Great to be here. Thank you.
No problem at all. And today, we're actually going to be focusing in on some of the smaller business needs as far as the employer groups that have 10 or less employees. And Ryan has stopped by to give us some tips for those employer groups. And Ryan, what is the first thing that you want to bring to the bottom line today?
Sure. Happy to be here. So a couple of different tips, but to kind of get us started, understanding the Rogers curve of adoption. The Rogers adoption curve is a theory on how innovation and new technology gets adopted by individuals across a social system.
Okay, so the Rogers adoption curve, as it applies to business, because it sounds like it's something off of DHS or something like that.
Correct. So this has been kind of applied across different sales cycles as well. So it's typically when you have a new technology. Okay. I find that there's also a value to applying to just about any new company that's breaking into and disrupting a status quo. You can kind of take this adoption curve that has been studied around new technologies across social systems and actually apply it to your business when you're breaking into a new market and trying to disrupt the status quo for your customers.
Now, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and actually you had a great illustration on it. This curve was actually broken into sections. So what was the first section of the curve that you illustrated?
Correct. So there's 5 different sections of this curve. Innovators is the first section of the curve.
Okay.
And so it goes from innovators to early adopters. Then there's the early majority, the late majority, and laggards.
Okay, so what's the innovator section?
So when you're starting out, breaking into, you've now founded this new company and you're kind of breaking into this market, trying to find your first clients to come on board. Innovators are great because they're already forward thinking. They actively seek out new things. They have courage to kind of try new things. And so they're really open to innovation. They're open to kind of disrupting their own status quo.
Right.
By that nature, there's very few of them. There's not a lot of those. There's not going to be a lot. It's not like there's a whole market full of them. There's very few.
So these will be the risk takers, if you will.
Absolutely.
Right.
So there's a lot of risk that they are kind of inherently, they're comfortable taking. And therefore, they kind of also know, something to be key and aware of is that they know their position of taking new risks makes them kind of exclusive. Right. So they kind of know how they can negotiate from that position. So it's not unusual to have pushback on the price. They want to get a discount out of the gate. They also know they want very, very like favorable terms. Right. So they want to lock that kind of discount pricing into like a longer term. And the key there is that you can use these people to get those early wins.
So these are people that's already in your circle of influence.
A lot of times it is some people in your circle of influence. There's no doubt about it. There could be friends and family if you're breaking in, people that you already have some kind of connection to from an earlier industry or earlier kind of experience.
Tapping into people do business with people they like. So these are people that you pretty much have either direct rapport with or a layer or two away.
Correct. You can get there within a couple of layers. That's absolutely true. That's very common. My tip is that to capitulate on the actual terms, give them the discount, give them the favorable terms, and then get something in return. So you can negotiate back with making sure that they will be a reference. That's so key. You absolutely need to reference these people. They're your first wins. That they allow building out case studies to the proof of concept that what you're doing actually works. And then go even one step further and try to get a specific referral. So
right. So these people are pretty much
too.
Outgoing. The risk takers are pretty much outgoing personalities. And they're probably going to champion or cheerlead your cause to others. Is that something that you have found?
Absolutely. Right. And don't be surprised if this is like a one-call close. This is the first conversation can lead to a deal for these people. They are, they're actively looking for the next new thing. And so it's not they don't really need a lot of information to evaluate. They don't require a ton of information because they're not so risk averse. So they're going to be able to be more willing right out of the gate. If they like the concept, they like you, there's some sort of chemistry there. they're willing to kind of move forward. They're going to go right to negotiating a better deal, kind of lock in those prices, and then you just need to make sure you get something in return and get those early wins.
So what group of people follows that?
So then you want to move to early adopters. So these people kind of pride themselves as market leaders, forward thinking, similar to the innovators. However, they're not going to be first. They're simply not going to be the very first to dive in on the brand new thing.
Right.
They usually have more market share, and therefore they have more to risk to lose. So they want to actually take these risks, but they want to be calculated with them. They want to have more information. So they kind of make you earn it a little bit more. It's unlikely you're going to close them in that first conversation. You're typically going to have to prove a little bit more to them. So
they're the type of people, if I draw the analogy, that my neighbor got the lawnmower, the neighbor next door got the same lawnmower, my sister-in-law put the same lawnmower, so therefore I need that lawnmower.
Yeah, they need, exactly. A couple of wins ahead of them. Exactly right. So if they can see that this is working, you can kind of use these people out of the gate here. Once you have a few wins, they're influential in the market. They know they're usually cutting edge. It's kind of like a balance for them. They want to take risks because they know that's how they stay ahead. However, they want them to be calculated risks, and therefore they're not just going to jump onto the next new thing.
So they're not flying by the seat of their pants. They're more apt to maybe do some research online.
Exactly.
Maybe go to some reviews, hit some blogs, and then try to make the most intelligent decision that they can, right?
Absolutely. And what helps you then create those very initial, the origins, the base or foundation of your sales process. Because now you have to start coming up with a little bit of a discovery process and talking to them a little bit further. It's not like you just kind of like threw your idea out there and they jumped on. Innovators, maybe that worked, but now you really have to transition into a sales process. You have to do some discovery, learn about their specific business, their pain points, asking better questions. Then you have to start building out those case studies from those innovators that you've gotten on board. You have to kind of get the early goings of the process to show some proof that what you're doing actually works.
And this is where your patience begins on the sales side, because it's elongated sale, more elongated than the first one. So you have to have patience. And you can have false confidence from the innovator's sale as to they're all going to look just like that.
You're exactly right. I was just reading an article the other day, the false confidence of founders who go out and do the very, very initial sales. They get innovators on and they think they're in a position that they can go boom and just scale the business and explode with sales. And that never works. And there's a combo of things happening there. One is exactly what you just touched on. It's a different kind of person, so that you're not going to be able to have the same success. But also, you're bringing this passion. You're the original founder. There's something that people like to buy into that. You're not going to be able to scale that. You have to go run the business. And so you have to turn it into a sales process at this point. You're not going to be able to continue just kind of winging it off of your story, off of your pitch.
And then it's the emotional component. If you actually your first time out, you go to the first 10 people and they're all saying, "Hey Ryan, you're the greatest," and we're going to buy it, within the first 15 minutes. And then you go into the other section of it, and you're actually dealing with the early adopters. You may not close them all. So you have to actually, now it starts coming to your rejection experience. How do you fend that off? How do you stave off the depression or the feeling of failure in terms of in that process?
Yeah, I agree completely. You're not going to get any easy wins past those kind of innovators that it's almost by their nature that they're easy wins. It's really not what you were doing necessarily. To your point, it's like a false confidence.
It was your game to lose, really.
Yeah, exactly.
What do we have in the next section?
So you move on from there, you're going to have the early majority. And so this is kind of the first big group of followers. They are risk averse, which means they're not going to take a lot of risks. They're going to be a little bit more measured about this. They really do want to see that what they buy is going to work, and they need kind of proof behind that. And that's not just one or two wins and one or two success stories. They kind of need to see that there's multiple wins and a little more longevity. A lot of times, depending on your sales cycle, depending on what product you're selling and kind of the price tag it comes with, this could be months or this could be years, depending on what you're doing. If it's a large enterprise sale that the sales cycle takes 12 to 24 months to begin with, then these people, need to see you in the market for many years. Otherwise, they're not going to come on board.
So these people are actually tied to name brands. So, in
tried and true.
Right. So, something new that comes along in the marketplace, it really has to either knock their socks off or they have to have so much reinforcement. Now, do these early majority, are they actually influenced by, let's say, print ads and media advertising, or are they still cautious despite how much money you throw into the market to brand yourself?
That's an interesting question. So I think it would depend on the industry for sure, but in my experience, I think it does help. That's a part of your branding. They need to see that you're a real company. There's awareness of you. So, for instance, when I was with Zoomer, we didn't have a really good presence. We were a technology company, and we were disrupting the restaurant delivery space with their operations within delivery restaurants, and yet we didn't really have a great presence out of the gate online. We didn't have a great, robust website out of the gate. We were spending our time elsewhere. And then we got to a point where we realized we really needed to boost that awareness. So whether it is print or an online footprint or your social media, I think this group, I think you're right, it'll apply to that. They're going to want to do their homework. And if they go trying to do homework and don't see you anywhere, and they don't see your advertisements, and you're not in any kind of print, and you're not in any kind of media, then it might be something that they're waiting to see you kind of get that foothold.
So you have to have a little bit of maturity with these folks, white paper studies, different things they can reference to actually go back and get the confidence.
Exactly right. And back to your sales process that you started to kind of just formulate right out of the gate with those early adopters. The early majority, by the time you're trying to sell to them, you should have a little bit of that. You should have the white paper. You should have the material and the collateral that goes with marketing and sales. You should have a process that's kind of been built out, a little bit more tried and true at that point, that you can then apply to this early majority.
Right. And if you don't have those type of studies on your own, then you can actually reference some of your competitors and what they're doing and actually leverage some of their, just so that the person will have confidence in the concept. And then you actually sell yourself over top of that in some instances. I have seen that done in the insurance industry, whereas though the company that was starting out did not have enough longevity to have all those different pieces. But what they did say is this is what the market's doing. This is what the industry is doing. And because you know that this product exists and is doing well, we actually are trying to enhance that product by maybe delivering it faster or making it more user-friendly or whatever it is, because we're actually leveraging the fact that this particular product does work, but we're just putting our spin on it. So sometimes that does work when it comes down to actually selling. If you take an industry, I'm just gonna throw it out there, like the barbershop industry. It's been the same way it's been for 80 years. You come in there, you sit down, and you wait
same chairs
an eternity to get your hair cut or whatever. You would think that in somewhere along the line in 2018, there's someone that would have more or less like the Verizon store approach to it, when you come there and Ryan's blinking on the monitor, and you know you're going to see Joe.
Checked it on an iPad.
In 15 minutes, yeah, something like that. But so someone does not have to necessarily reintroduce the hair cutting industry to you. They just have to go ahead and then therefore tell you what their spin on that industry would be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So hopefully, that will help some of the small businesses out there, especially when they're actually when they're getting into a business where there's already competition. You use your competition as an asset.
Absolutely.
So what's in the next section?
So yeah, then the last two are kind of bulked together. When we're talking about who we're targeting for our target audience, early businesses, you really want to focus on those innovators and early adopters, and then eventually build a process for the early majority. The late majority and the laggards, the last two sections are similar. Late majority is the second group, the second big group of followers. They absolutely need the product to be kind of nearly perfect, and they're simply not going to take risks on that. So there really just needs to be a serious, market penetration. You have a mature product, you're a mature company at this point, and everybody has accepted your brand. All the things you touched on around your advertising is definitely out there. People know who you are, and then they're going to start coming on board. They need many, many examples of success, and they're simply just going to wait and need time to be completely certain that you're not going anywhere. And the laggards are really a group that if you can identify early to stay away from, they're almost so risk averse that they just simply will not take risks ever, even when it becomes pretty established. There's almost like an inherent pride to the fact that they're kind of sticking to their status quo. Right. So you have to be really careful not to go down sales processes and waste time or someone who's simply just not going to be converted into a customer.
Well, what I would say about the late majority is one of the reasons why you should have stellar customer service, because the late majority, as you describe it, are people who will be very ticky-tacky and picky about every little nuance of the product. These are the people that will call and write letters and so forth and so on. And then if you go to any major company and look at the reviews or customer reviews, you'll find a product that will have maybe if the increments are up to 5 stars, there may be 100 5-star reviews, and then you start seeing these other folks that well, it came and the package was torn, but did it work? Yes, it worked. Oh, it came and then it was the directions was a little hard to read and so forth. But did it have a customer service number on the directions for you to call for help? You cannot satisfy some of these folks. So, that's the reason why companies, as they grow, there's going to be more and more of these late majority people. And you have to service them properly because these are the people that will run and tell everyone they know that they have subpar service. And, and these people have to be handled. They have to be, and the good part about it, in my experience, is that you can make them loyal customers, but they just like to be coddled. It's just like a cross-section of society. You're always going to get the whiners and complainers, and you have to learn how to deal with it on a business level. And you can't get frustrated with these people because of the fact that, it's just part of the cost of doing business. And the other thing is about the laggards. The laggards is what I would consider legacy customers. Once you acquire them, it's tooth and nails to get them, but they're a legacy. These are the people that like to brag about the fact that they only buy Fords, or they only shop and get their refrigerators from Sears. They've been doing that for 30 years, so that they will entertain your conversation, and you do have an opportunity to sell them, but they're going to tell you that's going to be a tough fight. You got to fight tooth and nail to get the business. You have to realize what your ROI is. At a point in time, these laggards, it may be conducive to your sales process that you try them once, 2, 3, 4 times, and then maybe at some point in time you have to cut bait because these are loyal legacy customers to whatever it is that their processes that they're dealing with, and you really it depends on how much the sale is, how much the commission is, and how much do you have invested in this process. Now, if you are in a business, such as some sales professionals, where you have to take your prospects out to dinner and to lunch and travel to their office, you need to be very aware of where you are in terms of the dollar spent when dealing with these folks, because they have no problem in having you entertain them.
You're absolutely right. That's a part of this. You want to, in the early conversations, as quickly as possible, try to identify. I think you're absolutely right, because if you do make a mistake and think you have somebody that's in the innovator, early adopter bucket who is on the laggard end of this scale, and you are in a business where you have to do that kind of effort, spend that kind of money, you've now wasted all of that. And you don't have a lot of shots early on when you're building a new business. You're absolutely right. You have to be really careful out of the gate to make sure that you're spending your own ROI. You're spending the time with people who are most likely to convert into a customer. And that's people on that earlier end of the spectrum.
So you have another section here, Ryan, called Obsessing Over Your Buyer. Explain how that works.
Before you even get into obsessing over the buyer, I think it's helpful to frame up the conversation with understanding, these founders and the people that start business, the people that actually, the innovators that are visionaries that kind of get the business off the ground, understanding their mindset. So these people are spending all of their time, all of their personal time and professional time for months and typically years talking about this business, right? They have to convince everybody it's a good idea to go do this business, to launch this business.
Sure.
And that is essentially a persuasive pitch. They're pitching their friends and family to make sure they don't sound crazy. They need to pitch people to join them, so they have to find co-founders sometimes and early employees. And of course, you're selling them on the vision of what you're going to go do.
Right.
You eventually need money a lot of times, especially if it's a kind of a tech startup. So you're talking to angel investors or VCs, and you're absolutely pitching there.
Right.
And essentially, you're kind of pitching yourself, because these people, they need an element of kind of crazy confidence to go do something so bold as to start a new business, especially if it's a disruptive new business. So you're literally convincing yourself over all this time. And you should be doing that. You should be believing your pitch. You should have that kind of passion for what you're going to go do. But after all these months and maybe years, you now have the business, and now you're going to all of a sudden get in front of a potential customer, someone that needs to buy. And that's a totally different conversation. And what typically happens, it's very natural for that founder, that visionary, to start pitching. I call it you throw up all over the prospect. You walk in and kind of verbally throw up all over them. You're going to pitch everything about your vision, the business, the features, why you're amazing. And it's going to be this huge pitch that so far has worked to convince people to join you, has worked to convince maybe a founder or a VCs to give you money.
Right.
And now it's not working. All of a sudden, the buyer, the customer is going to pass. They're going to say no. And so it's your mentality that you need to then make this big pivot. You have to switch from going from this pitch, it's like a proactive pitch, to you have to turn into discovery. You have to turn into asking questions. You have to understand this buyer is a unique buyer, and you have to understand what their pain points are, or what potentially their desired benefits are, and how your new business, new solution will actually either eliminate those pain points or achieve those desires. And that's a specific skill set that most visionaries, in my experience, and most people who are founding companies do not possess. They have strengths elsewhere. And so it's tough to be both of those people. And so if you're not going to be both of those people, if you don't have that kind of talent to kind of cover both of those people, I do think, and obviously I'm biased, I'm a salesperson, I do think you should be focusing on bringing somebody on early on who has kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, but has the sales background that can evangelize those early sales for you.
Absolutely.
I'll borrow this phrase from Jeb Blunt. I saw it in his book, it's Sales EQ. I've seen it in a couple of different places. People buy for their reasons, not yours. And that happens all the time to early kind of founders and people who start businesses. They come away from the prospect and they're like, I can't believe they didn't buy. Did they not hear me correctly? They start thinking they need to repackage the message and then go back in and talk more. It's like so typical that they think it's more about almost like forcing it down their throat, what you're saying. And what
they start to look at the customer or the prospect as being nuts.
Yes, they can't believe it because they've been getting all these yeses.
Or the fact that, I spent 5 years developing this thing, and I know that it's cutting edge.
I know it's going to work. And to your point earlier, those people, I do think the founders should kind of get those very initial, like 1 or 2 or 3 sales. So they're going to have a couple innovators, those people from the very beginning of the spectrum. So they're going to say, all these VCs think I'm right. All of these family members think I'm right. I've got employees that are on board. I've got 1 or 2 wins on board. And then they hit this wall where they're trying to sell to that kind of early adopter crowd. And it's because they are pitching still, and they actually haven't developed any kind of discovery yet. Well, what I really should kind of focus on what they're good at and get somebody in here who can do that.
What I like to do is I like to borrow from one of the age-old champion in terms of selling machine, and that's the political process. If you look at the political process, what do? They actually have a lot of content. Each candidate, no matter which level you're talking about, whether you're talking about state or a local, state or federal, but they bring them down. They bring their entire points down to one-liners: "Make America great again." Yes, we can. No more taxes. No new taxes. So the thing of it is that you have to bring your message down to a soundbite, and you have to be able to drill that soundbite. Now, the thing about it is that you could talk a lot less, but keep hitting that soundbite, and the person will start to digest. That's the reason why the political candidates do it. Every time they end a speech, they end it with the same soundbite. Every time you see something on TV, it's the same soundbite. Every time they're writing something or whatever, it's the same soundbite, because they're trying to drill that into your head, because they're with everything else that they have said can be a wash. But you need to hear that one message over and over again, so that when you go to vote, or in this case, go to buy, that's what it's recording. If you look at any particular major company, they have a tagline. They spend a lot of time on cultivating that tagline. Small businesses spend about 5 seconds. We're the greatest around, period. And that sucks. You have to have something that you're trying to impress. That's why it's called the brand. Branding, if you think about branding an animal, you are impressing an imprint on something. So you're pressing the input of your message on someone's brain, so that when they go out they might not even consciously think they're going to buy your product, but you have impressed and reinforced it so much that they really don't have any much choice but to buy that product. And and that's my take on it, Ryan. I think that if more businesses act like larger businesses, there's a reason why businesses are large. All you have to do is mimic what they're doing, A lot of times small businesses are so intimidated. Say, well, this is what we're going to do for right now, and then when we get larger, we will do the things that larger businesses do. Completely wrong. How do you think larger businesses got to be large? They did the things that they're doing now on scale when they were smaller.
Yeah, I think you can get to that point, and that is if you look at the curve. To your point about these larger companies, they are selling, or the political example, they are selling to masses. So they're selling to both early and late majority, and they're trying to hit everybody. And I think you're right. If you boil it down, you want to get it to that succinct message. And they have a tried and true message. They've been able to work at it to get to that point where they're going to have that mass appeal, that mass adoption. Right. I think you're absolutely right that when you're getting to that point, you're going to try to do as much as you can to get a succinct message into as many years as possible. And
but when
it's
you look
kind of
at
tried
it,
and true.
When you look at it, and if you take a presidential candidate, most presidential candidates, and you look at them when they were actually when they were a senator, same type of message, smaller scale. Then when they were governor, same type of message, smaller scale. When they were a mayoral candidate of the city, same type of message, smaller scale. When they were a local city council person, same type of message, smaller scale. It works no matter how you do it. As you get more money, then you have more exposure. But Certainly. It's the same type of process no matter where you are. Even if you're running for student council in some high school, it's still the same message, smaller scale.
Yep.
So what do we have next, Ryan?
Well, to touch on the obsess over your buyer, so that's the mindset. I kind of it's laid the foundation of like you really need to get to somebody who's going to be able to spend their time on this.
Uh-huh.
I coined a term at Zoom where I would call it obsessively curious when we were kind of teaching and training this out. It's like you're almost turning into an investigative journalist. If you're the first person going out and kind of evangelizing these sales to the early adopters and eventually the early majority, you really need to spend time with those buyers and kind of obsess over who they are, their world, their organizations, their company. You need to learn everything you can about their business, even things that aren't necessarily obviously going to relate to the problem you're solving or your particular offering. You need to, and so for an example, when I was spending time with delivery restaurants, the decision maker was an owner, but I would spend time with everybody in the organization, the cashier, the busboy, the delivery drivers, cooks, managers, servers, everybody, to get an understanding of what that business actually was doing and how it operated on a day-to-day. You would also spend time with people that are outside your target list. So let's say if you have a geography that you're kind of looking at, go to a different geography to just understand what it's like to be that buyer. It's like you have to kind of obsess over being them and understanding their business before you can really uncover what those pain points truly are, how they see those pain points, or what kind of benefits and desires they're trying to achieve so that you can then kind of tailor your message to either get rid of those pain points or achieve those benefits. And you can't do that without spending the time. The hard work is spending the time. You have to be there with them and understand everything about their business before you can go ahead and just start pitching or find one little nugget you think is a pain point and then come down on them about all the great things about your company and think they're going to buy.
I'm a fan of Chef Ramsay and Hell's Kitchen and also Kitchen Nightmares. And when Chef Ramsay goes into a restaurant and he starts to critique their methodology and their delivery systems, sometimes it's just agony. It's an agonizing experience for the owner to really digest what's happening in his or her business. It's almost like, grief counseling, if you will. They have to, like someone passed away, because they have such an acceptance of, this is my dream, but you have basically diagnosed my business as basically being in a terminal condition. And how do I? And now you're actually trying to breathe life into my business, but then I have to humble myself to recognize that the information that you're giving me is factual. And it's such a journey for these folks. I mean, it's such a personal journey for them.
Personal. You nailed it. There is so much emotion there. I think you're spot on about the experience I've had of selling to small businesses, that it's really easy for them to fall into that trap thinking how personal it is and treating it almost like it is a person, like it's almost a part of the family.
And Ryan, I'm going to give you the floor as time is running out. Give us a summation of all we talked about today, and what do you want the business owners to take away from this conversation?
So I think if we're going to kind of sum up those two subjects, so if you can understand this curve and then understand that you need to obsess kind of over your buyer, I think the key things are to recognize your own strength. When you're a founder and you're kind of building this company, are you really the person that should be taking on the responsibility of bringing in revenue? After you've gotten those very early wins to kind of prove that this is something you should try to scale, and you've sold those innovators, recognize that you've basically sold innovators. You've sold people that are in your sphere of influence, and it's not necessarily indicative that you've got the process and the ability to go scale out and get a bunch of wins. Don't make a mistake of hiring a big sales force. You need to hire probably one specific person who's going to 100% focus on that. And it's key that when they're out there trying to sell to the early adopters, that they are trying to bucket people into those kind of 5 buckets. They're going to look at whether or not they are on the innovator, early adopter end of the spectrum, or if they are on the laggard side, and not waste their time, because you just don't have the runway. You have to get wins. And the way to do that is to kind of obsess over the buyer. If that person can focus 100% of their time on these buyers, you're going to end up developing your discovery process, the discovery questions that are necessary to understand their specific status quo, how they see the status quo, not how you've been pitching the existing status quo, was to VCs, not how you think the status quo looks. That one buyer, how they particularly view their own status quo, where their pain points lie, or where their true pain points are, or where they could potentially gain a benefit. And then that person can then craft the message to solve that. And so they can take what you do, your solution, and kind of tailor it towards those benefits that those people are trying to achieve, or that pain point that you're trying to eliminate. I think it's really important that those are the first building blocks of being able to put together a sales process, to develop the collateral that you need, to develop all of the different discovery questions, to develop the marketing material, and all those different pieces that eventually you can then start attacking the larger market. But you can't do that without somebody who's got to kind of be obsessively curious to kind of just discover everything there is possible about these prospects, and to leave your assumptions at the door and just go in there and have them tell you the reality. It's really what's important to know.
So Ryan, if someone wanted to get in contact with you and talk to you in greater detail, how would they do so?
LinkedIn's probably best. It'll be in the show notes when this is published, but you can certainly search for Ryan Gallagher on LinkedIn as well.
Well, Ryan, it's been a pleasure for you to join me here on The Bottom Line, and I enjoyed your conversation. I thought it was the most entertaining and informational, and it was a pleasure chatting with you today on The Bottom Line.
Russell, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you for listening to The Bottom Line Show on The Grit Live. If you would like to be a guest business leader or sales expert, please reach out to us at 610-803-3684.